You're listening to Ricky Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for In Between Drafts. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Hymas.
And today we're doing a manga recap of One Piece chapter 1072 or 1072. I just like saying 107. I don't know. It reads better to me. But this one's called The Weight of Memory. And obviously, we're going to be discussing the weight of spoilers for the One Piece manga up until this point. So if you have not read the chapter yet, you can read it right now for free on the official Viz website up to 3 weeks after its official release, which is today, January 22nd, which we're going to link in the show notes. All right, Travis, got to start with the big question because this is a beefy chapter in terms of theories and speculation and world building. And I'll say real quick, like if we get anything wrong here, or if you, the listener, have something insightful you want to add, you can let us know in our Discord. We have a link to join our Discord and hang out with us in the One Piece spoilers server or the general One Piece talk for non-spoiler issues. That's in the show notes. But Travis, beefy chapter, what did you think of this one?
It's very much what we were talking about before when we did 1071. There is just so much happening so fast. It feels almost like it's all very One Piece, but we're moving so quickly and getting so many answers and layers to this. It feels like we're compressing everything.
Compressing? You mean just like compressing like the story that we're getting? Like we're not just like...
If I were to explain it a little better...
We're not going off tangents. We're like new characters.
But you remember before you were talking about Dressrosa and how there were often multiple flashbacks and things felt a little dragged out. It feels like if this were a normal One Piece arc, everything that happened in this chapter would have been stretched over 4, 5, 6, maybe even 10 chapters.
I see that. Yeah.
So, and that's not a criticism of either direction, but it is just a reminder that we are in uncharted territory in the most literal sense here.
Well, I'll say, I get a lot of heat for this, but this was what I liked about both Zoe and Whole Cake Island. I actually felt like Whole Cake Island kind of moved along at a brisk pace. Like I think people didn't like reading that week to week, and I get that, but I just felt like we were in this like island. The characters we were being introduced to were relevant and very interesting, but we were always kind of staying in with the plot. Like it was always very focused on the Sanji Pudding wedding. And I'm kind of feeling like this kind of chapter too. We're not going in a bunch of different directions. We're not doing this whole thing where it's like 3 straight chapters for just one satellite's character journey or something. There's a lot of mixing around, but yeah, let's walk through this one because I think the main part of our discussion is going to be the last couple pages, but that's not to say that we don't have plenty of other things to talk about that lead up until the final big reveal, right? First off, we do have the cover story, which is very interesting. I still can't get over that. So many people speculated that Caesar Clown, for example, was going to be like more of a cabin boy of Mads, kind of like the young apprentice, because he's not perceived as like that talented, but we see him in the cover story. He's like, he's a contemporary with Queen and Judge. And I do think it's interesting too that the Germa 66 cover story has been so like unceremoniously hijacked by these flashbacks. What do you think?
It's very funny because it's not completely being hijacked, right? Like Judge is right there. We're still doing Germa. This is like you were saying, we're not spending extra time in Whole Cake Island having Judge meet Caesar and doing all of this in the actual story. We're now expanding the concept of a cover story to do things that Oda doesn't want to do in an SBS, wants to actually write in, and they're becoming incredibly relevant as we go on. It's very well done work for a single page of a single panel of a page, nonetheless.
Yeah, it makes me wonder too if we're actually going to get a lot of this stuff in the anime. Like if they're going to cover this material a bit differently when we get to Egghead in the anime, and these are kind of relevant. I mean, I don't know how relevant, but I don't know if they can really get away with not kind of at least having some flashbacks or some material showing Mads. But I guess we'll find out more if that's going to be important a little later in the manga. I
think just the fact that Kuzan shows up in the cover story and then shows up also in a chapter with the same event. I think we are to a point now where they're going to have to do it, but that's fine. I've always been okay with them doing like the 1 or 2 episodes that they've done before when a cover story became relevant to what's going on, just knocking those out almost like filler episodes. Totally fine. No problem with that.
Because we haven't even gotten anything for like, the Lola and like all of that cover story, for instance. We didn't really get any of that in the anime. We didn't really get anything with like the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Like we haven't seen them. We haven't heard from them in the anime. So I feel bad for anime only watchers because you're missing out on like so much fun stuff, because the cover stories tended to do a lot of that extra backfilling. I also want to mention there's something interesting to me about Judge having his like spear thing. For some reason, I thought that he didn't have that for a long time. I don't know why I thought that, but that's just been something that's kind of been bugging me in the background. Maybe it'll come to me later. Why I thought that was interesting. I think you're
noticing that time is passing, because the time between the last cover story and this cover story, just look at Queen.
Mm-hmm.
He's already
different.
His body has already started, because his whole thing about his weight gain and like becoming like this optimal beast of a person. You're already seeing that happen, and because we know that about, we know who all 3 of these men are, and we know what their stories have kind of been just from what they've told us about themselves. We can now judge that time is passing from that first cover story to now, and notably, there's only 3 of them rather than the 5 we saw previously.
Yeah, it seems like the last chapter was like the beginning of Mads, and now we're kind of like, this is them sort of hitting their stride, it looks like, because it says mass-produced weapons of slaughter. So this is like when they're creating their individual, I think like pet experiments, right? Like Queen has like the chemist materials, like he's going to make the plague virus and stuff like that. Caesar has the devil, like looks like a smile fruit that he's developing. And then Judge is a little bit less clear. Like he's kind of like pointing the spear down, but he obviously has his clones and everything, or he has like the artificial children that he wants to create, which comes into play in this chapter very significantly. Cause then we go to this whole thing about, it looks like it's something being written in a diary or a letter. We don't really know the context for the second person kind of thing that we're getting in the beginning, but it's talking about, this person was cloned, but, they're a true and undeniable human being, and it was successful, a living, breathing person. And we don't really get context for what this is even referring to until the end of the chapter. But I thought that was an interesting storytelling technique, because it's not the narrator, right?
No, it's not. They've done this a few different times in the past. It's usually a reference to a book or something Robin is reading. We've seen it before.
It has a sign off I forgot to mention. So it says from Dr. Vegapunk, director of MADS, Laboratory for Peace. Yeah.
It almost feels like a scientific journal.
Yeah. Or
something like that. But yeah, hard to say exactly what it is, but we'll get to the payoff on that later.
Right. Speaking of payoffs, we have this whole thing where Bonnie is like pretending to be hurt and injured so that Vegapunk will stop running away. And then, of course, she gets all violent and starts attacking him. And I thought this was weird because, like, okay, she seems to believe Vegapunk is evil enough to straight up kill her father for seemingly no good reason. But she also believes that he's a good enough person to fall for this whole, like, her pretending to be injured and needs help. So, like, we know that she spent time with Vegapunk, grew up, on Egghead in part, right? Like, she's not a stranger to him. She seems to understand that he's not inherently a bad dude. So it makes it interesting to me that she has this, like, very irrational temper toward him. Like, she's willing to be violent and threatening him. Like, it's definitely irrational. And I'm really hoping that we get more backstory that explains this. I hope it's not just waved away.
This is the moment that I want to bring up a question, and I'm hoping you have an answer for me, because it dawned on me reading this. Do we know the name even of Bonnie's devil fruit?
Good question. I thought we did. Let me double check that. Or let me just did you look it up already?
No, I kind of poked around, but I tried not to spoil the fun here for this too much by reading too far into things.
It's unnamed. Yeah, it's an unnamed paramecia type devil fruit that allows her to alter the age of other people and her own as well.
See, and so now we are seeing in this section her doing more than that. Yeah. We see this devil fruit doing things we've never seen it do before. And I wonder if things like her personality have been affected by it, because you're like, it's irrational, but is it so much that it's not consistent as it is between an adult Bonnie and a child Bonnie going back and forth.
Or, question.
It may just be an effect.
Yeah, because I was going to mention this too, because the next thing she does is she uses a technique called age skewer. And it does something that we've seen before, where it takes Vegapunk and it turns him like very, very young. But it's very different from when we've seen her do this to like Jinbei, for instance, when she turns him young. We don't see all these like they're called sparkling gems like popping out of Jinbei, but they pop out of Vegapunk. So it made me wonder a bunch of things. Like, first of all, like, why did this happen for Vegapunk? Is it because he is older and like has more, experience? It's interesting to me because, to what you were saying, it's taking something that's intangible experience and turning it tangible, which we immediately get this whole thing in this chapter about that being Kuma's power. And so it keeps making me wonder, like, is this a devil fruit ability at all? Right? Like, she has a devil fruit ability. Kuma has a devil fruit ability from the Paw fruit. Mm-hmm. But is this aspect of it, or is there some aspect of both of them that has to tie into their like mysterious race, right? That they seem to have some power that, to what I can tell, seems to exist outside of their devil fruit abilities, right?
I mean, we'll pop into the flashback piece of this, and I think talk about that a little bit more. But I also want to call attention to the other power she puts forward that I think is even more interesting than that.
Like breaking the lock?
Is the distorted future move, where she almost does her own like Gear 4th form,
right?
And kind of bulks up, and that's interesting. Just the very notion of it not of like somebody's future not being a straight line, like she takes a different form than she's taken before.
She did that to Luffy, right? Like she turned him into like the version of the pirate, right, who doesn't become Pirate King, like the Luffy who's like old and frail.
Right. So I mean, clearly there's some sort of devil fruit power still in play here, but it's doing things that we have not seen before. I would almost compare it to, again, like Gear 4th, except we know Luffy's fruit isn't actually a paramecia. So I'm morbidly curious as to how any of this works. Do the can she absorb those gems, even if it doesn't work permanently? If that's a physical thing.
Because it's Egghead, right? It reminds me of like Sonic, like you're losing your rings and you can like absorb them again. There is something kind of funny about that. And I was going to say too, because we're going to talk about Awakenings later and how there's just so much confusion around them when it comes to Zoans and Paramecias. Specifically, like when we see like Luffy do Gear 4th, he has like those clouds. Like he has like the look of like an awakened Zoan, like normal Zoan, not mythical. But we'll get to that stuff too. But that's just been bugging me. I'm like, where are we going with all that? Because none of it seems that consistent, but it seems like there is like some kind of purpose that doesn't make sense right now that we'll understand later, I think. We also see Kuma is still climbing up the red port. The Marines are blowing him up. So as this is like paralleling with Bonnie going into the laboratory, we even get this kind of comedic thing where, you know, she like goes toward this door and like Vegapunk's like, no, that has nothing to do with Kuma. And it has like literally a big paw print on it. And she's like hell it is. But no, I mean, she's threatening Vegapunk even more and is like, you know, if you have a good reason for killing him, then you need to tell me. But he's like, no, I can't tell you. I promised Kuma I wouldn't. And they're at odds, obviously, because clearly like this was Kuma's choice and like Bonnie can't accept it and she's struggling, right? And I think that it is sad, but like it does have like the storytelling purpose of getting to the point where she has to like, experience it for herself. So we see the big paw print memory and it looks like we're moving toward this thing where it's the flashback of this chapter is going to be her experiencing the memory of her father, which I actually think is a really nice touch. I think it's different. We're not just going to do this sort of like a character explaining something and then the audience gets to, you know, view it. Instead, it's tying back to this power that we know that Kuma has, but I think we've only seen him use once before in canon, right? Yeah,
in this form, and it's very much supposed to communicate what you're saying. It is that whatever happens here is going to hurt, but also it's deviated because, and when we get to the anime, it's going to have to find probably a different color code or something for this to help communicate it. But she straight up tells Vegapunk, no, I'm very familiar with how my father's powers work. This isn't pain. So it looks like what happened to Zoro, but it feels like it's going to process very differently when
I could see that. Yeah, because what happened to Zoro was, for people who don't remember in Thriller Bark, what happened was nothing happened. You're right. No, Kuma took the pain, all the pain from Luffy that he had experienced during the fight with Oars and with Moria and all of that, and allowed it to transfer to Zoro through that paw print. And it laid him out, right? But he was able to withstand it just barely. So it's something that Vegapunk says here that like this could kill Bonnie. So it seems to be related in that sense. But to what you're saying, she seems to have a different idea of how this will happen, right? Because it's more about a memory and the pain of memory, right? And I find that interesting. I
emotional pain rather than physical pain.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, this speaks, I think, again to. I think there's something kind of weird going on here with Kuma and Jewelry Bonnie's powers and like their whatever race they're part of. It seems to be one of the races that Big Mom never got to, or maybe Big Mom doesn't even know that this race exists, because she said, I think there were like 2 races that she didn't have any on her crew, 2 or 3. I think one was Lunarian, one was a giant. And I don't know if this is like a third one, but that's a whole other thing. I don't know if we'll ever get that paid off, but, or if we're wrong and that he is some kind of like, or he's, Kuma and Bonnie aren't part of some mysterious race. I forget how all that checked out, honestly.
She has said that Kuma is a part of a race. We don't know what race that is.
And some people think she's adopted, but we don't have that confirmed for sure.
I have some new crazy theories, but that we have saved for
now that we have clones. There's all kinds of theories that can happen.
Yeah, in that section though, we also get a flashback with Vegapunk and Kuma.
Yeah, so he mentions the 21 grams of lost weight after you die being the soul, and he references a scholar in the West Blue, who I think is Dr. Hogback. And you, when I told you my theory for that, you did not argue. You're like,
no, that seems pretty spot on. Especially there's actual real life. Did some digging in this. There's real life point of reference for where this is coming from.
Yeah, it's like a pseudo-scientific theory.
It's a pseudoscience,
from like a century ago. There was like an experiment to see if you could lose your. I forget the name of the scientist, but he was a bit of a fraud.
It's a Mac. He was Scottish or something, but that sounds like Hogback. You know what I mean? Slightly ethically dubious, questionable science behind it. That sounds like him. I don't know if that's super relevant to anything, but
I think it makes sense. Well, I think it's a nice atmosphere thing. Like we may never get confirmation that it's him, but it just goes further with all of the like referencing of Thriller Bark in this chapter. It's so interesting because like we've been getting a lot of Enies Lobby and Water 7 in previous chapters. Now we're getting Thriller Bark, which I was not really expecting, but I probably should, because that's when we really see Kuma in action, right? So that's what I was thinking, because who else would be that obsessed with souls? And then I looked it up and it confirmed that for sure Dr. Hogback is from the West Blue. So it looks like that,
Yeah, I think you're spot on.
I think it would make sense. I don't know if he'll actually get brought up here. He died, didn't he? Or did he get captured? I forget what happened to him in the manga. It's been so long.
Oh gosh, didn't he get defeated? I think he's alive, right? Well, alive being a tentative word here.
Yeah, like I wonder if he was like taken by Kuma, like and sent to Impel. I don't remember what happened to him. To be totally honest with you.
Got away. We know that.
Well, no, didn't Perona get like
she got out? Yeah, he sent her. I don't know if he sent Hogback. That's interesting.
I'm gonna look it up because I kind of want to know. I feel
look
bad.
it up.
It's been a while since
the keyboard's very clacky, so I don't want to type. But
I'm on the wiki.
Interesting idea.
It says after Moria's defeat, Hogback found and woke up Absalom, whom he explained the situation to before claiming that he would not die as a loser and asking Absalom what he wanted to do. So they left Thriller Bark on a smaller escape boat with the defeated Moria on board. So they couldn't find Perona. It looks like, they made it out. And then I think we did find out that Absalom was clearly taken by the Blackbeard pirates. They got his fruit, but I don't think we know.
Yeah, they were separated, right? At some point they had to have been. Yeah,
because it says here that we did see Hogback, or at least he was referencing the Summit War, because after the war, it looks like they rescued Moria from Doflamingo because Doflamingo was ordered to kill him. So I guess that's the last we know of him. Who knows what happened to him after that? Probably nothing. He's probably just like hanging out.
I'm sure we'll have an answer to this in the NNSBS when the chapters come around for reprint.
Yeah, like, do you think Moria is ever going to come back to the story? People always talk about Enel, and bringing the moon and the space pirates, but
I have always Moria is an interesting kind of conundrum because I've always been curious specifically about the kill order with him.
Oh yeah, like why they wanted to kill him?
Like, was this just hey, you let us down in this, so we want to get rid of you? Which, like, I guess is fair, but like the other warlords were about as useful at stopping Luffy from doing anything too. So it's very weird. And again, it being Doflamingo and Doflamingo knowing everything that he knows,
being
it's
a celestial dragon, and it looked like Moria and Hogback had some interest in immortality and the soul, which I know one of the more prominent theories about the celestial dragons, the Tenryubito, the Gorosei, in particular, is that they are immortal, or they at least have like an ability to not age. And it has something to do with law. It has something to do with the entire construction of the world. There's a lot of theorizing about that. So I could see, the danger of somebody like Moria being that, like, oh no, we don't want you to discover this. I don't know. That's a bit of a stretch, I think. But
yeah, I want to point out really quickly here that we just spent like maybe 5 to 10 minutes dissecting one line in a panel of this. Because I know
that's what we do.
I know we have people who listen to this that are not caught up or not super like sure about why we're like this all the time. But like, this is the kind of world building that we're talking about, where like even a thread like this can like go somewhere on our Pepe Silva conspiracy board and tie back into this. And then next thing you know, we're talking about stuff that happened 10, 15 years ago.
We can't do this with like Black. We can't do this with Black Clover, for instance.
No, no, it's and not all of it's like, it's not just Oda super genius, but also it's Oda super genius. But like, it's just kind of how this story has grown organically, where like, even if this isn't an intentional thing, someone's going to write a letter to Oda in Japan. He's going to read it and go, actually, that's a good idea. Let's just, that's canon now, whatever. Like,
yeah, why not?
That's happened before. It's like I said, I think you're pretty on the money with this. What do you think about the idea though, of it being accurate? Do you think the soul, it's like, this is actually talking about the soul? Is that the soul of Kuma in that paw print?
I mean, does that paw print look like it weighs 21 grams?
I mean, I don't know. It looks like a balloon to me. So well, like,
yeah.
How much is 21 grams? I'm American. It doesn't look like it weighs, right?
I weigh my food because I have a problem where I don't eat enough in certain days. Like I've gotten in trouble where like, oh gosh, like I have a threshold for how much I'm supposed to eat. And so I weigh things to make sure that I'm eating enough. But 21 grams is not a lot. It's like not even close to like a typical serving of something. Like usually servings are like 80 grams,
So would you say, we're going to hit my crazy nonsensical theory number one here. Would you say it's about the weight of a fruit? Possibly.
Well, the devil fruits probably weigh way more than that. They probably weigh like half a pound or something.
I mean, they just take over an existing fruit, right? Also, how does that work?
Yeah. Well, we were talking about dreams and maybe souls like being related to devil fruits because they have to do with wishes, and there is reincarnation in this story, so it's not far off to suggest that. Although you were saying earlier that like, oh, I'm gonna gloat, but I don't know if your theory about Kuma being the one that Vegapunk
not
called.
The one no, that's not my gloat that I have planned.
I don't know. I mean, it's still possible, but I have a feeling that it's not going to be that.
Because, I have a new theory on that. I think, but
okay, I'll let you speak that when your moment comes. But we do see Kuma get blown off the wall as he's climbing at Redport. As I mentioned earlier, this is interspersing with the Bonnie Vegapunk stuff, and the Marines are trying to hold him down, but he's still fighting them off. He's still kind of glitchy though. It looks like he's like in dire straits. Like the last thing we see of him is like he could get brought down here, and I was wondering if he does get brought down or something happens to him further. I feel like they got to bring in a more recognizable like Marine character here. I think we see like one he's like shown up before, like the guy with the headphones, I guess. But I'm expecting like, if probably not an admiral, but I could see, like maybe a captain, maybe somebody who's like higher up the chain, who could, maybe even a character we don't know yet, coming face to face with Kuma and something happening there. Just a little mild speculation from me on that, because that's usually what happens in One Piece, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I think at this point it's clear, like, we don't even need it spelled out anymore. I think it's clear that whatever Vegapunk's process for the pacifistas were, it began with the Iron Giant. I think at this point, whether he took parts directly from it or copied something from that old machine is in this man.
Yeah, because didn't we say last time that like literally when the Iron Giant thing happens and Egghead, that's when he like sparks and is like, I gotta go.
Yeah, it's almost spot on, and it's right about the time that Shaka also tells the other satellites, and of course the Straw Hats aren't reunited at this point yet; they're not together. But he says, it's time to prepare for battle. It's all happening, at least as far as we could tell, at the same time. So, that begs a bunch of questions in terms of what happened 200 years ago with the Giant originally. But technically, since Kuma has beat up a few Marines, he's done more damage than the Iron Giant did.
Yeah.
He's already made more progress, and he hasn't even made it up the wall. Either way, I do think we are about to see the end of at least the original body of Bartholomew Kuma, provided that actually is, but we'll get to that.
Right. And so we do have one last thing. I know we had like a little bit of a scene where Vegapunk is essentially begging Kuma to let him like look into his memories because it'll help him with like science and everything. And I was wondering like why he wants to do that. And part of me wonders if Vegapunk's interest in Kuma's power to turn things like pain and memory tangible is related to his dream of uniting the world with a type of mental internet. Because he even mentions that, like he says, like it's like sending the peripheral nervous system signals via radio, and that seems very similar, I think, to like what he was saying earlier in the chapter about that's how he wants to like bring world peace. It's like everybody's able to communicate, right? So I wonder if there's something going on there that explains like why he's so obsessed with Kuma in this way.
That's I think that's a good catch because this is a flashback, but the antenna for the labo phase is already on Vegapunk in the flashback. So this is not a relatively new creation of his, we could say for sure.
Right. And it makes you wonder if like the satellites are like related to his research in Akuma. Like he was able to create them and do all that because of like the neurons and everything. He was able to create the satellites. Yeah.
It seems that way. At the very least the labo phase is here. We don't see any satellites. So it's entirely possible that that's the case. I think the guy very clearly values one thing over anything else, and that's the pursuit of knowledge itself. He wants answers, and he is willing to do just about anything to get them. He strikes me as a character who the very notion of being able to prove a theory about the weight of the soul or being able to physically quantify what a memory is. I think he's the kind of person that, regardless of his morals, regardless of his alignment, that is a temptation too powerful. And this is just kind of how I feel about him personally right now. It's very weird that we're seeing the things that we're seeing of Mads and seeing Vegapunk involved in them at the same time. It's one of those things where he doesn't seem to be a joiner. He doesn't seem to be someone who's willing to actually get his hands dirty. But here he is, and he has taken moral stance before with Caesar and everything like that. But it's very clear that he's capable of compartmentalizing a bit. He's still able to sign off Mads as the laboratory of peace, even though it's very clearly not the case, up until I'm assuming it no longer can be something he can avoid. I think he's just desperately curious, constantly curious, almost to a fault.
Yeah, I agree with you there for sure. So we go to the labo phase again, and now we're back with the main Straw Hats, or at least we don't see all of them. Like we don't get any Luffy in this chapter, but we do see Usopp, Sanji, Frankie, and Nami, and they're in the control room, it looks like, and Shaka says that part of the reason that CP0 was able to get in was because it seems we had a systems malfunction. So we still don't know who the traitor is or who must have lowered it. Obviously, I think it's still anybody's guess based on, I think we had plenty of speculation last time about what might be going on there. But the main thing that gets brought up here is that Zoro and Brook are now going up against CP0, and it's 2 against 3, and but it's even worse because now the Seraphim have apparently also gotten into past the barrier, and even though they were not ordered to. And so Shaka explains that the Seraphim are equipped with just enough personality to make decisions for themselves based on like what's going on in battle. So it's kind of alluding to something that the manga has, and I guess the anime have talked about before, which is like that there's like a battle intelligence to certain characters. That's one of the things that makes Luffy so dangerous, is because he may seem like a doofus, but he's extremely intelligent when it comes to combat. He understands how to win a fight in a very like primal way. And so that made me think of that when he's talking about how the Seraphim seem to have that instinct, if that makes sense. Ultra instinct, if you want to get Dragon Ball about it.
Just to like a tactical mind.
Yeah, it's like, and it's a different kind of tactic because it's not Shikamaru type strategy.
Right.
It's more so of like understanding when to punch and when to dodge, and like it's stuff like that, which is very, it's a bit more, that's very Luffy. When you watch him fight, he doesn't tend to make mistakes in terms of like when to fight and when to run. He seems to be pretty good about that.
Yeah, unless he's testing something, right? He wants to see what the limits of something are or try to understand something. But he doesn't need like a 2-page explainer on everybody's powers. Frankly, he couldn't care less. He can grasp that right away. It's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and so I know I brought this up and I was kind of confused. I think I talked to you about it, where I didn't understand why the Seraphim were considered dangerous, because I was like, well, Vegapunk's supposed to be able to order them. So I thought it was weird that they were so like concerned, because it seemed like they should just leave and then take control of the Seraphim. Like I didn't understand like why they didn't do that in the first place. And sure enough, like we get confirmation again, like more confirmation, because it was already stated that the Seraphim will, follow the orders of any of the satellites over CP0, right? And so the whole logistics of this don't make sense to me. Like I don't really get like why. Like I get why CP0 would leave the Seraphim behind, but why does Lucci think that he, Sussy, and Kaku can on their own, not even with like underlings and stuff, and no Seraphim? How do they take on the Straw Hat Pirates plus all the satellites? It makes no sense. Like he literally just lost to Luffy.
He doesn't think he lost to Luffy. That's to answer your question. Why does a character do a dumb thing? Because they're being dumb.
But that's the thing. Lucci doesn't seem dumb. Is it his bloodthirstiness?
He's in his head. He's in his own head now.
It just seems so...
normally he is cool. He is cool as ice. He has no problems following orders. He has no problems executing. But Luffy has this effect on everyone. We just never got to really see it with Lucci because of the way Enies Lobby played out.
Yeah.
But Luffy has the ability to change minds. And that's not just of his crew or of the people around him. It's of his enemies.
Yeah, he breaks their will.
Impact. Yeah, and he changes things about them. We saw it in Impel Down when we got a grand tour of all these people who have every reason in the world to not want anything to do with him or to kill him, end up siding with him in this very personal, even for their own reasons. It's still kind of a weird decision.
Crocodile.
Put a fire under Crocodile for sure. And with Lucci's, I think he's being motivated simply by that. I refuse to acknowledge Straw Hat as an emperor, because if Lucci actually does that, if he says the Monkey D. Luffy is an emperor of the sea, I am no longer allowed to touch him. That's an acknowledgement that Luffy is stronger than him. That he is not only the one who got away, he will always get away.
It's more of that irrationality, right?
It's irrationality.
Because it's like he lost to Luffy. He's 0 for 2.
He's 0 for 2.
Sorry, he's 1 for 3. He beat Luffy the first time they fought.
True.
And sure, he was able to basically like bring Luffy down multiple times in their fight, but overall lost.
Yeah, and let's be clear, Luffy was not trying very long. If Luffy wanted to actually have that fight go the whole 10 rounds, he would absolutely do it. He just has other things he needs to do, and he's at least grown enough to know that, hey, this is no longer things I can waste my time with. Yeah, we got to
more
go.
of that battle intelligence, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and maturity. He has grown over time. But when it comes down to it, when the time does come, and it looks like it's going to come, they're going to go the full 10 rounds. And I mean, we know it's going to come out Luffy. That's already been baseline set. So for Lucci, this is denial. He is firmly in his denial phase right now, where the entire world is upside down, and he is willing to disregard the orders that they have been provided, which, again, don't come from the Navy. They come from the old geriatrics. This is not people you want to mess with, and he knows that. He just doesn't care. Right now, he doesn't care. He needs to get over Luffy, because if he doesn't get over Luffy, it means Luffy was right the entire time.
We still have a missing puzzle piece, right? I think we talked about this, where for a while, Lucci and Kaku in particular were on the run. And they, the government was like trying to kill them because of what happened. Like, they took the blame for Robin escaping Ennie's lobby with the Straw Hats. And we still don't know what happened, how they sort of like realigned with the government and joined CP0. We don't know why or how that happened.
And there's a moment during
that why he would be a little bit like, I don't trust them, or I don't care, because
I think this is them Oda trying to communicate that even Lucci has been moved a little bit in a different direction.
I could maybe see Lucci having some kind of arrangement with Eam, for example, where it's outside of the Gorosei, and like Eam having like using Lucci as his own sort of like hammer and nail for something, and that's like maybe why he doesn't care, because he has like a grander motivation. I just get this sense that like there's more going on with him that he's puzzling out.
That would be interesting, since they were willing to completely eliminate an island at the chance of preventing another person knowing the existence of Eam, right? So the very idea that Eam might actually have other cohorts is that would be a
believe
twist.
it, because it just seems a little bit too. It seems too much of a hierarchy that only the Gorosei are even aware of him, right? And it would make sense to me that like if the Gorosei have this issue with Lucci, who could override that? And Eam to me is the only one. But more wild speculation from your old pal John.
No, I think it's interesting because it's a good look into where Lucci is, and we're gonna get an actual expression of honest to goodness emotion from him.
Yeah.
Later on here, just a couple of pages away.
Yeah.
And like I said, everything is topsy-turvy for him right now. Everything is. He's questioning things. And I always think of Lucci. The thing that always is fascinating to me about Lucci, especially like in the time skip that we know where his place is. During that cover story where they're on the run, there is a scene where Lucci has made his peace with just a normal life.
Mm.
They've found a place to hide out. They've found, labor, basically. They found the life they pretended to have in Water 7, basically. And he seems to be okay with that. And I've always wondered if that was honest or if it was just him putting on the face until he could figure out how to get back in the government's good graces. Right. And it could always be either way. And I really wonder if he really is just at the core of his person, just still so self-serving about hey, I just want to kill some people, man. At the end of the day, I just want to take these claws and I just want to put them in a dude. And I'm good with that. As long as you let me do that, I'll do whatever you want. And then there's Luffy, the one person he never really got to finish that with. So either he has been changed by Luffy or will be changed by Luffy, not necessarily for the better. And I could absolutely see him becoming kind of a recurring, an actual recurring character. He's shown up a bunch, but
you know what I would love? And then this is going to get me in trouble again, as usual. This is ridiculous, but I want him to be undercover again and like reversing his like being undercover for CP9, this time being undercover for some other third party. And, either the revolutionaries or some pirate crew or somebody, because I think that would just be a wonderful twist. Like, it would just be so funny if we found out that like the person who found him on that farm was not, the Gorosei, but instead was, like Dragon or some nonsense, and basically convincing him to go on this crazy undercover mission and to undermine the Gorosei, which is why he wouldn't care. I'm just trying to figure out his motivation, and I just want to explore every angle of it.
I mean, we sure know that there's at least one double agent among them.
Right. Before we get to that, so
I wanted to ask you about the traitor real quick, because
Sure.
speaking of things that don't necessarily make sense, the Seraphim are up on the lava phase, and you're right, the Vegapunks take control. They basically execute that plan. The Edison and Lilith depart along with Sanji to go basically do exactly that.
Yeah.
And
it looks like Frankie is going to.
Yeah, Frankie's going to. I'm just looking at the page because I want to make sure I'm understanding. So what I don't get about this is Shaka. Mm-hmm. Because Shaka is not the person who comes to the realization that they can just take the Seraphim back, which is weird to me.
Yeah, well, he says before that, like, oh yeah, CP0 wouldn't have wanted them here. So, and then he says,
right,
I think
but he says the
like,
odds are worse, not better. The odds are worse when he points out the Seraphim.
That's right. Yeah, which doesn't seem very logical for the logic guy.
Or he's parsing it, like he's either taking his time more than the others are.
Well, yeah, because I mean, there is in the short term, like if they're not down there, then the Seraphim can like make short work of Zoro and Brook. So I mean, that's true. So like but he does seem a little bit slow in the uptake. Like he isn't as impulsive, and that might just be his. I think you even said that last time that like that's kind of his deal. Is like one of the reasons he might not be the traitor is he doesn't seem impulsive enough for something like that to like make a decision that quickly and to be that decisive. And I could see that in this case, of him just being like, all right, yeah, do that because it makes sense. Which I wonder more interesting to me.
Yeah, and then the Seraphim start firing on the lab. And we're going to talk about what's happening interspersed with that here in a second, I'm sure. But he's like, oh no, they're going to destroy the lab. I really am curious to see how this gets voiced in the anime, because I'm really starting to visualize monotone from him. Not a lot of energy, but rather oh no, they're going to destroy the lab. Like almost on the edge of like sarcasm.
You just don't trust him. It's
something about his demeanor that is so weird now, and like it was weird for everybody else like last time, like for me now it's really starting to seem odd, because like if anybody was gonna nail, the Seraphim are up here, we're good, don't worry about it, just go grab them real quick. Like even Edison and Lilith leave before he issues the order. He's odd. He's very odd compared to the energy of everyone else in the room.
Yeah.
And maybe that's all it is.
Let's put a pin in that, because I think you might be onto something there. Mentioned before that the comedy is working a little bit better in this chapter than it has. Like I don't remember finding it as funny last time, because we have here like Sanji is just sort of so sad.
That's the best joke in the entire chapter.
Mashead dies in the line of duty just before we reach the One Piece, and obviously there's like the funny of like Nami's like, no, you're going to, but I do think it's funny that, and then Sanji calls himself a Sanji Fim because he takes Nami's orders. But the whole thing with that is interesting because, and Tekking brought this up. He did a video about the chapter on YouTube, and he mentioned that we're probably going to get more references like this to the One Piece because the end is in sight for Oda. And I think that he does probably want to keep referencing it. So we already got the big reference to it with Shanks telling his crew that like, all right, let's go for the One Piece, baby. And then before that, of course, like a while before that, we had Kaido and Big Mom being like, we're going to get the One Piece. And so there seems to be some table setting that like this manga is still theoretically, allegedly about the One Piece. So just letting you know.
It's like, especially with like the Shanks one in particular, it's like Whitebeard's death, where like in that moment, even though it wasn't directly relevant to events happening, what Whitebeard decides to spend his final moments doing is telling everyone, the audience included, no, there is a One Piece. There is a physical One Piece. It is out there. Someone will find it. And that was like, because Marineford and all of that is such a big pivotal turning point for One Piece as a series. And you could say the same about around where we are right now, where like, yeah, no, we're realigning our focus. Hey, a reminder, we are moving somewhere.
One of these days we need to do our favorite theories for what the One Piece is.
Oh man,
because that would be a fun one. There's so many good ones.
There's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of sarcastic ones too. It's really easy to get in your head that like it's going to be something anticlimactic because that almost feels like the perfect like joke. But with given how much it hovers over everything in this series, every little layer that we get, the things that we learn even about the weight of the soul, it makes it all that more tantalizing that whatever, like all of these secrets of the world that we learn, even just in this chapter, whether they're accurate or not, that in terms of theories or anything like that, the greatest mystery of all, we still have only gotten like 2 honest to goodness, real valuable clues on.
Right.
And that's nuts. That's crazy to think about.
That we know of. I mean, there might be other clues and we just don't know that they're clues, right?
I'm just thinking of like the most tangible stuff. Like number one, we know that it's real. It's not the friends we made along the way, et cetera, et cetera. We know that it's real, and we know where it is.
And we know
the
that
significance of where that, what
and we
it's
know
called.
that Goldie Roger finds it funny that
found it funny.
Yeah. Well, found it funny, but then also found it like to be misinterpreted what he said about like the island and stuff like that up until his death.
Oh, you mean the island name? Or
well, I think he said that about the island name, but then also like the treasure. And like didn't he have some kind of like reference to like people not getting it and then that informing like why he said what he said right before he died?
Well, he definitely, what he said before he died was definitely calculated.
Yes,
but,
exactly.
I think what I remember him saying from that, at least from the actual flashback, was more of him being too early for it, whatever it is, and the world not being ready. And then he ties that to Joy Boy by legitimately just saying, "Oh, I wish I lived in your time." Yes. So like that's, those are the 2 main clues, right? Like Laugh Tale, what that means, why it has that name.
And then, of course, people speculating that Wano the borders have to be open for this.
Right, and, which means the weapons have to be. And then immediately, like I said, the One Piece hovers over all of this because the dominoes immediately start to fall. Right. The second you start talking, you can't just talk about the One Piece in a vacuum. It is ironically, I don't even think people need to be reminded of it. I get like Tyking would say that and everything like that. I don't think we need to be reminded. It's the core of everything. At the end of the day, like that's why Luffy doesn't want any spoilers because it would ruin it.
I don't think it's less like we need to be reminded. I think it's more of like Oda sending a signal to us and just being like, I get it. Look, I know you're waiting for this. And it's just him giving some kind of assurance, that's how I interpret it. I think that's what Tekken was getting at.
Yeah, and that's fair. Obviously, I don't think we're going to go from Egghead to the end of the series. I think most people
be a while, sure,
come around. Yeah, they've come around to calming down a little bit because they hear Final Saga and they're like, oh no, we're probably a year out from the end of One. We're probably not a year out from the end of One Piece.
A year?
There's
no
way. There's no way.
It's wild to think that we're 5 years. I think we're 10.
5 years is my generous guess because Oda time is, of course, a complicated math equation that is, that basically it's just a dilution of time versus light.
This is ending in the 2030s. That's my foot in the sand for this.
That's what we should talk about. It's like guessing when One Piece will actually end.
2032 is my guess.
I mean, if Shueisha has its way, never.
Right.
Okay, so you want to talk about Kaku? You want to talk about Kaku real
that's
quick?
The next part of this. Yeah. So Brook and Zoro are kind of like facing down Kaku in his awakened form, and I've been waiting to talk about this. So Zoro starts fighting him, and he appears to be awakened because he has the same dark flames that obviously Lucci had before. Lucci had when he awakened his Zoan, and this has brought up a whole thing for me with like the Gear 4th. But then also like Gear 5th and the difference between it. And I have been struggling a lot with the whole system behind awakenings. There's this whole thing where Zoro even says like, oh, I just got done fighting plenty of wriggling things back in Wano. And at first I'm like, yeah, what he means is like the fact that, Kaido like turned into the dragon, was like kind of spiraling. And then he fought King, who did sort of similar stuff. And on the other hand, it makes me wonder if he's speaking about like awakenings here too, or like in terms of like awakened Zoans and like how annoying they are. And I know you have some thoughts on this. We had a bit of a contentious discussion about what is like before we talked about on this right now, this podcast. Yeah. I just want to understand why it seems like King and Queen were beaten so easily in the grand scheme of things. Because it doesn't seem like they were awakened. It doesn't seem like, and I know I said like it's Kaido, he had to have been awakened, right? But I'm starting to wonder, maybe he wasn't. Like maybe he for real was not an awakened mythical Zoan, right? Or if he was, it's because he awakened a fish fruit into a dragon kind of thing. And I know this is causing all kinds of stress.
This is a weird thing, because at this point, 2 times is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. So, like, at this point, apropos of anything else, it does seem like this is the visual syndicate, like the visual indicator that Oda is going to use going forward. I do think it's interesting that the clouds around Lucci and Kaku are inked in, and Luffy's are white.
Yes,
and we know canonically that they are white. Just like the steam, and I would have chalked it up to even that steam originally, like with Gear Forth and everything. But now I'm questioning if Gear Forth itself was just Luffy on the precipice of awakening the whole time. Which seems reasonable, since he develops that after the loss of Ace, after that big trauma. That makes sense. And he's always had Gear Forth. That's the thing that's worth remembering is Gear Forth was something he figured out during the time skip. It just didn't need to use it until we got to Doflamingo. So like, it's such a weird thing, because we could just chalk it all up to like, oh, he thought of the smoke with Gear Forth because it makes him look like Enma, and that's clearly where that inspiration comes from. And then he extended it out. Like, this has just been a gradual evolution of Oda's design choices. And now that that's all been solidified, he's going to apply it to the others. But then you have Kaido, and that makes all of this so weird, because the clouds weren't just there. Whereas with the others, it's kind of an aesthetic thing. With Kaido, it is literally a part of how his powers work. So it's very, very, very strange and difficult to parse. Mm-hmm. You would think he would be awakened, just because Doflamingo was. And, people love power scaling. If Doflamingo was awakened and Luffy beat him, then the next tier up would be a more powerful Devil Fruit that is also awakened.
But I have my own like kind of pet theory for this that I floated to you, and here it is. And then I don't know if this, and I saw there other people are saying this too, so it's not just me alone in the wilderness. So my sense is that it is much, much harder and more technical and complicated to awaken an ancient Zoan or a mythical type Zoan. And it's much easier, or perhaps there is an artificial way to awaken a normal Zoan fruit, because we know the prison guards at Impel Down also awaken their devil fruits. We know that now. I think the only 2 like really confirmed awakened Zoans on top of that would be like normal Zoans would be Lucci and Kaku. And the thing that ties all these people together is the fact that they work for the Marines. So it makes me wonder if there's like a way to like artificially awaken these types of fruits that is not as complicated.
If I might add to your theory a little bit, Rumble Ball,
which we don't know if that's really an awakening, or if it's like kind of like a Gear Forth type of thing where it's like the precipice, right?
Right.
But awakening is artificial, to your point.
Yeah. If you wanted to open that up, if Chopper eventually reaches a point where he can do Monster Point without the need of Rumble Ball at all, putting aside control of it or anything like that, if he's able to just have full transformation access at all times without any medical help, assistance, that would probably end up being classified as an awakening. But I don't think Sengoku was awakened either, and he's a mythical. That's worth pointing out. He was one of the most powerful Marines. The fact that Lucci's and Kaku's look so similar, it's very possible that Lucci awakened it and then just taught Kaku exactly what he did, and he replicated it.
Mm-hmm.
It could even just be that. Just the very structure of the Marines makes it easier to grow strength in that way. Whereas with pirates, it's, very loosey-goosey. You make your own way kind of thing. But the idea that it could be artificially stimulated, I think the existence of Chopper kind of helps you in making that argument.
Right, because to me it would make sense. And like, I think that if we only have one real instance of an awakened mythical, which would be Luffy, because I really just don't buy that Kaido was awakened based on what we know. I think that it's also a pathway for him to come back to the story, because I think the way that Luffy awakened it was he had to die, essentially. Like his heart had to stop.
Yeah, that's what it looks like, is he had to push himself to literally the limit, and the ultimate limit is, of course, being dead on the ground.
Being dead, sense. But then having to be reborn or reincarnated as the fruit that he ate. And I think there is something about that inherited will, something about the Joy Boy thing. That's what Kaido wanted. I think he wanted to die. I think he wanted to find a powerful opponent to kill him in order to reincarnate as Joy Boy. And that's why he was crying, that like you couldn't be Joy Boy either. Because I think that he needed to fight somebody powerful enough to kill him, essentially, which makes me wonder if he can awaken his fruit now that he's like, hanging out with Big Mom in lava, being defeated. He could come back into the story as an awakened mythical fruit user. And my thing is that he probably would be changed by this. And I really, really want him to come back into the story, and not as an antagonist to the Straw Hats and not as an ally, but as somebody who's going to use his awakened fruit to like cause all kinds of problems and basically wreak havoc. That's what I want.
And I also think that Kaido will return to the story in some way, if only because we didn't get much of his backstory, and that was a disappointing thing for some people.
Yeah, it was shortcut a bit.
It was shortcut a bit. I don't necessarily mind that. If we never got him again, I don't necessarily mind that. We spent a lot of time getting to know him through other characters, and I think that's fine. Lucci's backstory was also very truncated, and look at what we're getting with him now. It's I think just because of where Kaido situates in terms of reveals, finger quotes, especially with the end of this chapter in particular, I think we will see at least a flashback Kaido again.
Same.
And I think, and I'm just gonna support you in this theory, because at the end of the day, Momonosuke was able to just immediately age himself up and do the exact same thing Kaido did, right? So if Kaido was awakened, then Momonosuke was awakened, and we know for a fact that can't be the case. That just simply cannot be the case.
I think what made him powerful and one of the most powerful beings is the same thing that made Shanks so powerful, and it's Haki, right? And it almost makes you think that like Luffy really must be overpowered, because if Luffy not only is like at the highest advanced forms of Haki and has an awakened mythical, like he's basically he has
a god. He's supposed to be a god, right?
Sure,
like that's what they're pointing to.
Which would,
but yeah,
you're
right.
Which would explain why he just took down Lucci no problem, who's supposed to be pretty dangerous. But anyway,
Haki beats Devil Fruit. We do know that, and I mean, you think about how much power Kaido has between his Devil Fruit and his Haki. He was kind of a god in his own right. As far as we've never really dealt with gods, whether or not they exist in One Piece. We just have a lot of people who claim to be them.
Yeah.
So it makes total sense that that's the level that Luffy needed to go to, but it does absolutely leave the door open. And I personally like that Oda doesn't like killing characters. I know people have takes on that like it doesn't really bring up the stakes or anything, but I think a Kaido that could come back is way more interesting than a Kaido who dies.
Exactly.
So I'm on your court on this. I want you to be right. I wanna find out what Kaido's deal is.
So as soon as Zoro manages to land a pretty good blow on Kaku, it looks like. So it's looking like Kaku can't take him down. And I think that's why at that point Lucci is like, all right, the Seraphim need to destroy the lab because it might take longer than expected to finish off Zoro. And so the Seraphim are going to destroy the lab before Vegapunk comes out in order to prevent them from just losing this entire thing, right? Because if the Seraphim get turned, that's it. Game over. Easy. So they attack the lab. It doesn't look like the lab has been destroyed. We see like a lot of flames. We see a lot of explosions. It's
a big lab, right?
Yeah. But when we see the top part of the lab, like it looks like it gets like sliced off by something, probably by Mihawk.
Yeah. S-Hawk, I think is what, yeah.
And then, we only see like a little bit of like what happens to the people inside. Like we see Usopp kind of like flying out. Shaka doesn't look very shook. He's just kind of like hanging, and Nami's hanging onto Usopp, but we don't see anything else. So we don't know how much of the lab has been affected so far. But Kaku says it's like a light show. So it looks like Kaku's still okay. Like he didn't get like gravely injured until Stussy has turned into basically like a succubus. It looks like she's like a vampire like succubus. She chomps on Kaku out of nowhere, and Kaku is like freaking out. Hattori notices and starts going, and then Kaku is down. Like it's a one-hit KO from Stussy, which is significant because he's an awakened Zoan. And then That's when we get the moment where Lucci is like, "What are you doing?" And we get a look on his face that we've rarely seen, if ever.
It's my favorite Water 7 callback because it's a callback to their betrayal of Iceberg.
Yes, exactly. He gets iceberged. And then Stussy tells him that he put Kaku to sleep, and then now she's saying she's going to do the same to Lucci, and then we get no sort of we get a cliffhanger, but they don't leave it too much in the air. Oda is like, no, I'm going to set straight like exactly what this is. Stussy confirmed clone of Miss Buckingham. Stussy rocks pirates. Mad's clone experiment successful. Subject number 1, Stussy. So she is the successful clone reference in the beginning. This is a clone of Miss Buckingham, member of the Rocks Pirates, and I think as a lot of people are speculating, probably that same pirate who was Miss Buckin, who's the mother of Weevil, who has always said that Weevil was Whitebeard's son, and that they had a relationship. They were on the same ship, which would make her the original Miss Buckingham on the Rocks Pirates crew.
Which Marco also confirmed, by the way, back right before he departed Wano.
He confirmed that Miss Buckingham
would have been on the same ship as him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That part.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying. Okay. I thought you were saying like confirmed that Weevil was Whitebeard's son. I was like, wait. Yeah. When did that happen?
Oh, this almost certainly does, which is horrifyingly funny to me. But I have two notes here. Well, number one,
Weevil could be a clone.
Well, yeah, right. So
Who
number
is
one,
not a clone.
Number one,
begun the clone war theory wars have.
Right. Yeah. So number one, credit to the Viz translation, which took flack for giving Buckin the wrong name for a very long time among some fans. That they always took that as a mistranslation, and it looks like this is a Viz W for them. Yeah, that's a spot on. They should have done it incorrectly. Is what they should have done. And now we immediately clicked all that.
Now you get to gloat.
Now it's time to gloat because in our 1071 episode, I said, and I quote, "All eyes on Stussy. That's everything is around her as far as I'm concerned." And spot on.
Well done.
Spot on. There is, and I mean,
Stussy is sussy.
Stussy is sussy, and you know what? I gotta move her up the best scroll ranks too because, I immediately screenshot this and sent it to my spouse. Like, not the whole chapter, just the panel. I'm like, vampire girl, vampire girl, vampire girl.
Vampire just, weekend.
heads up. Excellent.
What to make of this?
I'm all for it. I hope she sticks around for a while. Personally,
she's kind of single-handedly really just reset the table here. So what in the world happens next?
Yeah. So we kind of knew clones were on the table, but I don't think we really had addressed the idea that a full-on person, it's one thing for Judge to churn out clone soldiers, right? Do clone troopers or whatever. But we're talking about potentially anybody who Vegapunk has had access to blood of could clone. We've been talking about borrowing powers and replicating devil fruits and growing, somewhat genetic matches, but still needing a solution to pass on the bloodline traits, of their abilities and skills and whatnot. And that's what the green blood's for. But now we have full-on one-to-one clones running around.
You're right. Not Seraphim, not this kind of hybrid experimental thing.
Yeah, unless the succubus power is a modification, right?
Yeah.
Because we've never seen Buckin do anything like that.
Makes me wonder if our 1v1 it makes me wonder if we're going to get a 1v1 with Stussy and Robin at some point, if they're going to be at odds.
It's almost begging for it, right? Yeah. Just to have them near each other, oh, I like your wings. Oh, me too.
Stussy has always been terrifying. I mean, people forget what she did at Whole Cake Island. Really just she has just been a very unpredictable character. And the fact that she was all of a sudden on CP0 without any explanation. I mean, there's a reason people should have been suspicious. She was she was introduced as a member of the underworld, the leader of the pleasure district, right?
Yes.
And now we see that she has some other agenda. What do you think that is, though? Because I think that this is not confirming, but certainly suggesting that she could be the one that Vegapunk called. in order to basically help them.
That's where I'm at too, actually.
It would make sense because
I would
that's
even
like,
peg her. Yeah, I would peg her at this point is if number one is correct and she is the one that Vegapunk called in, then number two, she's also the quote unquote traitor who brought down the lava phase, because she would know how to do that, I would assume, if she's an ally, and B, she knew the Seraphim would follow.
And she would have bit or chomped on Lucci or Kaku,
yeah,
as soon as the Seraphim started attacking the lab in order to stop them from doing it further damage. It would make a lot of sense.
It would, and it just would mean that we've just been misreading the situation, which is, at this point, I think quintessentially Stussy.
Well, the problem, I don't think she
being able to follow.
I don't think she lowered the defenses though. How would she have done that?
That's the question, right?
That doesn't make any sense.
How?
But if one of the Vegapunks knows that she's there, like I could see
have done
them
it. Shaka could have done it, knowing the Seraphim would follow. Except he acts like that's not a thing he planned for, which again makes him weird. At the very least, though, there's either a third interested party here. She is a clone of a Rocks pirate, so we have to bring up Blackbeard. But if she's not like acting as a third party, she has to be.
Oh no.
Did I just put that in your head?
Oh no! Oh no!
Is Stussy for 10th Titanic captain?
Is she the 10th Titanic captain? Oh no!
You didn't even think about it, did you?
No. Oh no! But that would make so much sense. That would explain so much. Because I've given up on Kuzan being a 10th Titanic. I don't think that's happening. But her, that would fit. That would absolutely fit.
I would even go so far as to say it's a scenario where she's been feeding Blackbeard information.
Yes.
Before he became a warlord, much less an emperor.
Specifically with like the devil fruit stuff.
Yeah.
And the clone stuff and everything, that all the sussy stuff around Blackbeard and what he's been able to do. And he's not far away. He's about to go toe to toe with Garp, it looks like. Look, he probably beat Law. We don't know what's going on there.
Interesting, isn't it, that Blackbeard is about to encounter the one man who we know for a fact knows the true fate of the Rocks pirates and what happened that day?
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it?
And that we'd get this kind of link to the Rocks pirates. Because I was telling you that I was so confused. Not confused, but I was trying to like bring some kind of connection between the Rocks pirates and Vegapunk. Because I was just really struggling with that, because we do have like Caesar has a connection to Kaido. He was like working for Kaido. Queen obviously worked for Kaido, but it just didn't seem like Kaido and Vegapunk had any other sort of thing, Judge doesn't really have anything specific, it looks like, with the Kaido or anybody else in the Rocks crew. So Stussy though could be that missing link that we've been kind of looking for. Her and Miss Buckingham, obviously the original.
Just to click in like how important Mads turns out to be in the grander story of at least post-time skip One Piece. Like Mads itself is a relatively, I'm gonna loosely here, newer concept for One Piece. We've only been dealing with it specifically named for a while comparatively, but you go back as far as Punk Hazard, the relationship established between Vegapunk and Caesar there, that was the seeds being sown for what's happening right now. This is technically one of the biggest payoffs we've ever had.
And I like the idea that Oda would be setting up the Blackbeard pirates as a huge threat by putting them in 3 different key locations, which for me would mean that they could be, there could be somebody like Kuzan and at Elbaf, right? Because if they have somebody here at Egghead and they have somebody at Fullerled, or like most of their crew, and they have stuff going on at Elbaf, it would really paint the threat of the Blackbeard pirates in a necessary way that they need to be. But at the same time, I do still think that there's a lot to be said about her being allied with Vegapunk and being called upon in this way, because there's the dialogue that Vegapunk has, or one of the Vegapunks, I think it was Edison, who's just like, oh no, if this person gets outed, then they're going to be on the run and all of that. So that would make sense for Stussy, like she would be blowing her cover. I think it's a pretty
if I'm leaning in any direction, it's definitely that one. That seems the most likely, without some sort of like, we're about to interrupt everything happening and doing a complicated flashback, and I don't see that happening. because this arc just doesn't seem interested in doing that, unless we're doing the Bonnie stuff next week, which is possible.
And should be said that if she is a clone, that means that Vegapunk was probably involved, right? Like as we see in the beginning, in cloning her. That would make sense why she would be sympathetic to Vegapunk, right? So
possibly, yeah.
It's interesting. And it was interesting that she was part of like the group to go kill him, you know? And so she would have had this like in her head the whole time. It makes you wonder, you know, if the Straw Hats hadn't shown up at all.
What would have happened here?
What would have happened? The Vegapunk probably...
If one of the other... I mean, it was all a flip of a hat. What happens if Law had come to Egghead?
Right.
Could you imagine?
He probably just would have like turned around and been like, you know what? Nah. Like, I don't want to deal with this.
But
he probably wouldn't have gone it because it's a government island. He probably would have been like, what's the point? Useless. Let's keep going.
Yeah, he probably would have just stayed under the water, actually. I guess we should draw our attention, though. I guess we should draw our attention, though, to probably the biggest part of this reveal, which is, of course, that Stussy is number one, and you don't number things if there's only one of them.
Oh, of course. I mean, this has been fodder for so many people of like, now who else is a clone? Is Bonnie a clone of Kuma? Is Dragon a clone? A big one. I kind of said it as a joke in a Discord, and then I started seeing people actually saying it as well. That Dragon is a clone of Zebek.
I have seen people claim that he's a descendant of Zebek, and this just opens up so many doors. Because his facial structure looks like the facial structure silhouette of Rock's, but it's also clear that the reason that is obscured is because there's something about his face that Oda does not want us to know. So I think that might be a red herring, or we are missing some very important context.
Exactly.
You want to hear this is my two absolutely insane ones.
Here we go. I've been waiting all week for this.
The first one is, so we have a little bit, again, I have Kuma truther syndrome. So there's a bit of a problem with Bartholomew Kuma, and that's that he almost seems like he's two different people. We have Bonnie's description of him. We have the flashbacks of Bonnie's memories of him that make him look different. We have the testimonies of the revolutionaries that align more with Bonnie's take. But we also know that he is Bartholomew Tyrant Kuma. We know that he is considered someone who was a monster or a terrible leader of his kingdom. His kingdom doesn't exist anymore. We know he was a pirate. We know that he had an incredibly high bounty before turning himself into the government, basically. And it has always been weird to have this particular this man with almost as if he was two men, you could say. Whereas if maybe there was a tyrant Kuma and a revolutionary Kuma. And I have no basis of that other than that would be an explanation for how we got there. And I expect to be proven wrong on that as early as next week.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't know.
Yeah. My other crazy theory, and this is something that I kind of formulated after checking some theories and everything, is who Bonnie really looks a lot like?
Go for it.
She looks like a young Charlotte Linlin, who we very recently saw in another character's flashback. So we have images to compare it to.
What? No.
And she does have an appetite. You got to admit, she's got an appetite.
You've gone down the rabbit hole.
I told you, these are the crazy ones. These are the ones that you open up this door. This is the kind of stuff people are going to come up with. Absolutely.
You think Big Mom is going to come back into the story though, in some real way?
I mean, this would be a way to do it without having to have her come back in the story. We know that the Big Mom pirates have to reappear, whether that's under Katakuri, whether that's with Lin returning, whether that's just with Pudding. There are, it has to come up. It absolutely has to come up because Pudding is, in particular, a very critical piece of Blackbeard's plan. It's one of those things where it's how much time does Oda want to spend doing that? Is really the question. But hey, if you need to resolve a character's history, them being a clone of somebody, whether that's a clone of Lin Lin or a clone of the dowager that she looked like when she, snuck into the reverie, or if it's something else entirely. I think there's something about Bonnie specifically that Vegapunk knows. I'm almost to the point where the pain of Kuma's past isn't even his own pain, is I guess really where I want to go with it. It has to do with her. It's something he's hiding from her.
Yeah, because I don't know.
Jewelry,
I do like
Jewelry D Bonnie.
Oh no, doing it again. I feel like I'm in like a tailspin with this, and I feel like we're always like a chapter away from answers, but then Oda's kind of putting it off. But I'm not even
and
being
throws
negative
another one. He
just keeps introducing more.
Yeah, and we are making progress. That's the other thing, is that it really feels like we're close to a head here, where like, we're either going to go into the traditional One Piece, everybody's going to split up and do a fight kind of thing, or we're almost done. This is like how Zoe kind of, they took care of Jack, and then we're on our way. We got stuff to do. That's really what it feels like to me. So I think we're, I don't think we're going to spend all year in Egghead. That's for sure. I think we're closer to the end than we are the middle.
I agree completely with that, because I just think that this is not a 1v1 kind of thing. It doesn't feel like the main arc here is for Luffy and his friends to overcome some great obstacle. I think it's like for them to navigate complicated world building, complicated world war stuff that they're not inherently interested in. And that's going to lead up to, we need that Zoe moment, where they have the alliance and everything kind of clicks into place of like, okay, here's what's going to be, here are the stakes for the next few arcs, right? Leading into like, this is why we have to beat Kaido. It goes beyond the Smile Fruits. It goes beyond all of that. It's about, saving Wano. Cool. That makes perfect sense to me. And that's what I want to see happen next, is like some kind of scene that's going to really crystallize, like, here's why we need to be involved in this specific conflict that is going to be related to the One Piece and world peace, not to like use that pun. I know people always use like the One Piece world peace pun. That's a funny, annoying thing there. Do you remember Kuma's first appearance?
It would have been, did he show up at that meeting of the warlords way back, or was it actually Thriller Bark that he showed up first? And I want to say his introduction was Thriller Bark, but I could be wrong.
It was not Thriller Bark, and in fact, I believe it was the same introduction as the Gorosei, the Five Elders.
Well, it was that meeting, right?
It was the meeting. Yes, you were right.
That's what I thought. Okay, all right.
So that's chapter 233. I'm looking at it right now. And yeah,
chapter 233.
Yes. This is the chapter right after Luffy. It's a great chapter, by the way. It's called The World's Greatest Power, and it's right after he punches out Bellamy. And he points up to the sky, and like that iconic, pointing up to the sky that we see that Gold Roger did as well.
Yeah, what an iconic period of time for One Piece in retrospect.
We see at one point Buggy the Clown as well with Alvia, and then after that we have the Gorosei, who have like brought in Sir Don Quixote do Flamingo and Sir Bartholomew Kuma, and so he's holding up the Bible and doing all that, and that's how the chapter ends. So fun little blast of the past. That'd be fun to kind of look at that again. And I remember him being like, I'm looking at 234 next. I remember him being so stoic and very interesting, right? But not a lot of clues. Like I don't see like a lot of world building that's really gonna like set off like who he is. So we know that when he was a warlord of the sea, his bounty got to 296 million berries. This is Kuma, and yeah, just point that out. Very interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of Jaya and Skypiea, I think, retrospective that's been happening over the past couple of years, where it's become more and more clear that this was around the period of time where Oda was really starting to lay the proper groundwork for the rest of the series. It's just been, like you said, we meet the Gorosei here. They have been one of the biggest influences in the entire series, but this is where they were introduced. We have Jaya's where we also met Blackbeard for the first time.
And literally this chapter, like right after, is our first introduction to Whitebeard and Shanks coming back into the story.
Looking back, it really feels like it's fascinating that you really bring this up.
Oh, and then Blackbeard, like with the money shot of him and the other pirates too. Wow, this is 234 is like a very key chapter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. This very first meeting,
it's literally called "Please Remember."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. And it was so far back in retrospect, but it really feels like the broader strokes of what Oda really wanted to accomplish start to come into place here. Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to get a lot of reevaluation of this and other stuff like Whole Cake Island, where Whole Cake Island still kind of feels like it's a little bit of a detour from what we were trying to do originally. But I mean, now with Stussy and CP0 now here, and all the mad stuff, it's really clear that we needed that detour. And there was a lot being sown in that basically for after Wano. Like, hey, we're going to sow these seeds real quick. We're going to resolve Sanji stuff because I need him to go through some character stuff in Wano. We're going to get through Wano, and then some really interesting stuff is going to pop off because I'm going to start those seeds that I've been planting all those years back are starting to pay off here. Yeah. Since you bring up those two chapters, though, I've pulled them up here now for myself as well. Do you think Kuma was already being converted at this point?
That's been a main thing, right? Of like, when did that happen for him? Because then not long after that is when we do have the Thriller Bark thing, and then we have Sabati Archipelago, where he seems to be moving toward like what he has been having like in the grand scheme of things. I think he's undercover at this point, or I think there's something going on with him that's like, even if he doesn't know it, that he is like working under some kind of like directive or some kind of thing like allied with Vegapunk in some key way, because
he's still sentient in all of this too. He's still having dialogue and everything like that. So if it's started, it can't have been too long.
Mm-hmm. And I think things like kind of deteriorated for him right after the war, which would make kind of sense, right? And then after the war, and then like when he's guarding the Straw Hats ship, and clearly like him sending the Straw Hats away was for their benefit, and so we know at that point, he's being nice. Mm-hmm. But there's something that must have happened between Thriller Bark and Sabati Archipelago that pushed him to do what he did, right?
Yeah, and so here's a thing that I want to ask you. Do you think Jesus exists in One Piece? This is not a non sequitur, I promise.
Jesus Burgess, yeah.
No, like the other one. The other one.
Oh, you mean like there's going to be some kind of like some kind of like one-to-one between like the Jesus Messiah story and a One Piece character?
No, more like Kuma is literally introduced holding a Bible and reading it in his actual like title card. In the chapter that we're looking at.
You think he died for our sins and rose again?
I think and this is just religious trauma speaking to me now that I am revisiting this. What if this is some sort of like redemption thing, all of this?
Well, if you look at the front of that Bible,
not for Kuma dying for the sea,
if you look at that Bible in 234, though, you get a close look at it when his hand isn't totally covering it, and we see this kind of like a seraphim-esque thing, like with the wings.
And the very nature of the seraphim to begin with, right?
Is that Joy Boy?
I don't know if it's I don't know if we're like going for an actual Christ allegory so much as it's just a
clouds,
very easy.
It has the sun behind him. It's like the dawn.
Maybe it's a Bible, not necessarily the Bible as we know it. But again, that idea of some sort of penance, real Catholic hours here.
Well, because
so
Joy Boy would be the original Jesus, wouldn't he? Because of the fact that like Luffy had to die to be like his like freest self, and Joy Boy made a mistake, or like Joy Boy basically like he had the apology, right? Fishman Island. That's how we're introduced to him. There is a lot to that, and there is a lot to like this idea of this whole thing, like there being like an Old Testament, you know, and like Jesus exists in the Old Testament, but Luffy exists in the New Testament as like the actual manifestation of it. Dang it, there is something there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's interesting because in every other context you would not, like, Galileo isn't referenced at all in One Piece. You know, we're not seeing, you know, Nami is a great navigator and has read a lot of navigation books and all that, but we don't hear about, like, you know, like, characters are inspired by historical figures. We don't have a Sir Francis Drake. We have an X Drake. You know what I mean? And he's a dinosaur man. You know, Marshall D. Teach himself is inspired by a real person. We have tons of those in One Piece. And then there's just the Bible, which has always been kind of a curious thing. And one of those fun, like, oh, this is kind of weird that, like, the Bible exists in One Piece. But, like, I'm just wondering if it's symbolism, if it's just a reference point. Because Kuma even says, like, you know, to Sengoku's calling them sea scum, he's like, yes, that's correct. That is what I am. And that's either an act or it's guilt, right? Like, that's right. But he's never really struck us as particularly violent. He's never struck us as like an actual antagonistic pirate. Every single, like, even before Sabaody, you know, he was willing to negotiate with Zoro for Luffy's release. So again, he clearly had agency during that period of time. And it just begs the question again, what is his deal? What is Homie's deal?
Well, and then don't forget with the Bible stuff, there's the Noah. There's literally an ark,
Noah reference, which
is an Old Testament thing.
Old Testament thing,
and also, what is the Void Century? But the time when the Israelites were in the wilderness, right? Like, isn't there?
Yeah, okay.
There's a whole period where they have to go to the Promised Land. What is the Promised Land? But, you know, a place that you have to find that, you know, has treasure.
I mean, there's no way it's just one-to-one like that, because, like, manga artists love using biblical allegory. They love it. It's their favorite thing. You know, just like we love borrowing from myths. Please don't leave negative comments. But, like,
well, yeah, like Greek mythology is something that it's like similar to that.
You know, we love pulling from that, and I think mangaka love doing the same thing, but with Christianity, which is not a thing that would fly here in a Western thing. But, you know, I can't get that out of my head, as we're so close to finding out what is the deal with Bartholomew Kuma, and at this point, if we can resolve that. You know, you pointing out again that Kuma was introduced at the same time as Doflamingo, we will have resolved one of the biggest mysteries of the entire series.
Yeah, I just can't get. Now I'm starting to think of like the D clan as like the chosen people, and no, but seriously, like,
and it's like a tribe rather than just like a bloodline or something.
And
right?
They're separated. They're in different places. Like, there's a clear sort of, you know, and there's like an agenda to get rid of them, against them. They get blamed for all the world's problems.
A governmental one, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the world government has always been very fascistic, but we haven't. We've never really gotten like a full-on sort of like World War II sort of arc, but who knows? I mean,
yeah, we still don't know. Yeah, I don't think that'll happen necessarily, but, like, I mean, the secrets of the Void Century are, of course, going to be ultimately, what did they do? What happened, right? And it's not going to be pretty. Whatever it is, it's not going to be pretty. I trust that Oda has had this in mind, again, for a very, very long time. I have no doubt in my mind that it'll be. If there was a worldwide, but
I think it's like basically probably true that there was a worldwide flood, you know, like in the Bible,
like the all blue,
like everything used to be all together, like Pangea, you know, and then there was a flood that broke everything out into islands, and then that's how we have what we have now. But I don't know. I mean, it definitely
think that's like, do you think the world government actually like that, like, all the nations are physically connected? Could that be possible?
I'm just thinking, like, is there a Mount Sinai in this sort of?
Yeah, we're gonna be dissecting it like
you and I are gonna be sending like the Pokemon Noah thing. Like, we're gonna be just like Noah.
Like, we're gonna do a One Piece Bible study.
Yeah, exactly.
I would be genuinely, if Oda ever wanted to give a speak, I would be absolutely jazzed at finding out what translation of the Bible Kuma's using.
Right. Man, what kind of book is that? And he's just like flashing it around. Who knows?
Yeah, it stands out. Once it's pointed out, it's hard to forget that, oh yeah, that's just the Bible, hypothetically.
Well, Travis, as usual, we have talked way more than we originally planned.
Yep.
I guess that's just kind of what we do. So once again, if you're listening and you have anything you want to add, something we missed or something you think we got wrong, whatever it is, you please join our Discord. So you can find a link to our Discord. It's for the Discord for In Between Drafts. We have a server for all One Piece spoilers. If you're caught up on the manga, you can chat in there and hang out with us. But if you don't want to talk spoilers or you kind of want to have more general One Piece conversations, we do have people in the One Piece is Real server, which don't spoil anybody there. But that's just for fun, basic like being a One Piece fan kind of stuff. So be sure to hang out with us. And Travis, thanks once again for helping me get One Piece theories off my chest. Dude, you're the best in the business when it comes to that.
Just because I get one thing right. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Well, we still don't know if you're going to get the Kuma thing right. There's a chance.
If I do, then something is wrong.
Well, we'll be back to talk about 1073. There's no break next week, so hopefully we'll have a chance to, cover that one too in due time. But for now, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.